Filmcast Without a Cause will not stand for criminal abuse this week with our review of Cloud Atlas and a discussion of spooky movies. But of course, the show starts with the news. Will there be a new Bond? Arnold returns to the Conan franchise, and Xmen in trouble. So without further ado, let's flock.
Boom boom tacos. This is Filmcast Without a Cause. My name is Jacob Rosdale, and I'm joined, as always, by Patrick Boberg. How are you doing, Pat?
I'm doing all right until you stole my catchphrase. How dare you?
Your catchphrase, boom boom tacos. I'm trying my hardest not to sound like a radio DJ this time. Editing the last show, I wanted to punch myself through the computer, through time, and say, stop trying to be a radio guy, Jacob. Just be a podcaster, so... gonna try this new tone out for size.
Sounds good.
But this is our show where we talk about movies generally, and we start off every episode by talking about some highlights from the week, news highlights from the week. And with Skyfall, the new James Bond movie, it opened in the UK. It's going to come out in the US in a couple of weeks. There's been a lot of James Bond news. The actress in the new Skyfall movie, I believe Naomi Harris, she's in 28 Days Later. She said that she would like to see, when Daniel Craig leaves, Idris Elba become the new James Bond. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think Idris Elba would be a good James Bond?
Well, I guess mostly where I know him from would be probably a mix of The Office and The Losers and Prometheus. So as much as I think he's cool in those roles, because obviously he's diverse from film to TV screen, I don't really know much about his action capabilities, I guess, outside of The Losers. But he definitely seems like a cool guy, and if he's British, all the better. Let's do it. What are you on board with this?
Yeah, and I think Idris Elba has been asked about this specifically.
He has. I watched a little clip when he was doing Prometheus. They asked him about like his favorite Bond moments and things like that, and what would he do if he was up for the role. He had some pretty interesting responses.
Maybe, and you can correct me if what you heard was different from what I heard, but he in the one interview I read, it sounded like he wasn't eager to take on the role because he didn't want to be the quote-unquote black James Bond, and he felt that would overshadow any actual work he did. Is that kind of what he repeated, or did he seem gung-ho for it in that Prometheus stuff?
Well, I'm assuming it's the same interview. He said in a follow-up question, it'd be fun, right? And then he went in this big, long screed about not only would I get in the cab, but I'd take a taxi driver out of the car, hostage, jump out while it was moving, jump into a pedal bike that was past the doors. I got into it, then get on a plane, blah, 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 keeps going, just action fun. So maybe he would be cool doing it as long as they didn't bring up the fact that he's black. Maybe he'd want to take like a Barack Obama approach to the situation.
I've probably seen about as much Idris Elba as you have. Maybe a couple. I also saw him in Ghost Rider and probably another couple things. And I'm fond of him. I think he's really cool. I think he's really smooth, and I'm a big Bond fan. I'm also not a racist. I'm going to put that out there. But I'm a little bit mixed on this. I do think he would be good in the role. I think he's British. I think that's more important than the race thing, actually, that you're British. And they've, in the past, they cast a Scotsman, Sean Connery, obviously. But there was time that they were considering an American in the role, James Brolin. And I think casting an American is a whole different thing than casting an African-American. I think he's cool. I think he's probably pretty physical. I think it all depends on whether or not you're one of the people who watches James Bond movies and tries to believe that they are the same person. Even though it changes actors. Things I can forgive, the character completely switching races, it would be hard for me to disconnect, even though I think he'd be good in his own, like in a version of the role that wasn't James Bond. I don't know. It's hard to say. Race is always a very touchy subject.
You could look at some of the people who've played him in the past, and they up until I'd say currently, they've had, with Daniel Craig currently, they've had guys who are more suave than, smoky and, just looked like they could break glass with a stare. And that's kind of where they went with Daniel Craig. And I think just from what we've seen of Idris that he might be able to pull that off. I don't know if he'd be the sexiest man alive when you look at Sean Connery or Roger Moore. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Roger Moore was ever the sexiest man alive.
And I just remember how much the fans freaked out when Daniel Craig was announced, and he's a slightly blonde actor, like he's like a dirty blonde and doesn't have the brown or the black hair, and fans freaked out. Craig obviously won people over with Casino Royale, but I just can't imagine how people would react. Part of me would want to see it happen just to see how people would react. The other part of me would just... I almost would rather have a black Doctor Who first, because that makes sense in the character, if we're talking about British icons. Before we switch topics, one thing that struck me about Idris Elba is I thought he was too old, maybe, for the role. But I looked it up. He's only 40, and Craig is currently 44, and he was 38 when Casino Royale was made. But that said, Daniel Craig is signed on for 2 more Bond films. And
I was going to say, I thought he was on for 5, because he's already done 3 with Skyfall.
2 more films. Optimistically, they would take 2 years each. I mean, that's best case scenario. We have one every other year. And I don't think that would happen. I think we'd have a 3-year gap or something in between. I mean, it took forever for this to get made, so who knows? At that point, he'd be ending the role at almost 50. He'd be around 49 or 50. So, and then Elba would take over in theory. He'd be 44 or 45. So that's not too late of a start, but especially if you consider Roger Moore was 58 when he ended the character. So not too old, but you're getting up there in believability. Talking about weird casting.
And an elderly actor. I don't know if elderly is correct, but older.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, who we've talked about on the show a few times. I'm a big fan. Pat, I don't know. You're not as much of a fan.
I am a fan of this movie that we're talking about. It's one of the first Arnold movies I ever saw.
And that film is Conan the Barbarian, correct?
Correct.
And Arnold is going through sort of a career resurgence after ending his governorship of California. He has a film coming out early January, The Last Stand. He has a film with Stallone coming out next year called The Tomb. A photo was released this week of his looking really militaristic for a film called The 10 or something like that. I can't remember what it's called, but
I think it is just called 10.
But the big news this week was that Arnold has been signed on or attached to, I guess, what you would call an unboot of the Conan franchise, considering it was rebooted last year or 2 years ago.
By the time this movie comes out, it'll be 2 years, because that was a year ago.
I'm glad you said you're a big fan of this, because I haven't seen the original Conan the Barbarian in years, so I can't really speak to it. But according to this story, that this new film kind of takes off immediately after how Barbarian ends.
Right after the Barbarian, not the second film?
Well, what I read, it sounds like it's going to ignore Destroyer and supposedly also the reboot. And because the film ends with Conan on a throne, right? And it says, next Conan the King. I kind of remember that.
If it does go from the first movie, that's a smart choice, because it's pretty much universally agreed that the second movie's trash. I haven't seen the third movie, or the new movie, I should say.
Was there a title for this announced film?
The Legend of Conan?
And apparently that'll take place with an older, obviously, since Arnold is older. What has struck me about Conan, I like I said, I haven't re-watched the films a lot. I did see the reboot, and I didn't think it was very good. But I did like the guy who played Conan. But it always struck to me, like, I've read a lot of the comics, maybe, and I haven't read any of the stories, but I've read some of the comics. And Conan, I think, gets pigeonholed as this dumb... I mean, he is a barbarian, but I think a lot of people think of him as a dumb brute. But in the comics, he seems quite smart and quite clever. Maybe now that Arnold is an actual actor, when the first Conan was made, it was his breakthrough film, and he barely spoke English. The idea of going back to Conan, now that he's a more experienced actor, I think this is a great idea. I'm actually quite excited for this.
Yeah, I think it could be really cool. And we know, obviously, from people who did check out the BS Report podcast that we mentioned a couple weeks ago, where Arnold Schwarzenegger did pretty much his entire history up into Conan, and it talked about Conan. I keep saying Conan because you know,
it's hard.
The last 15 years have been being a fan of Conan O'Brien, but Conan, he holds with such regard that film and what it did for him in his career, and he seems to love the character. And the first movie is pretty much a ridiculous fun romp. I don't really know if it might be fun and cool, and I know you're a big Schwarzenegger guy, but I don't know how he's going to be able to pull it off, especially because he's got 3 other films ahead of it. So that means if this comes out in 2014, he must just be burning his other films down, like shooting them off like cans on a fence or something, because he's going to be looking really old in this film. Maybe he's pulling a Rocky Balboa or something.
Well, the description that was in the article that we'll link to on the website referred to it as Conan's Unforgiven, which that's a pretty lofty goal to set yourself up to, but it's also kind of awesome. If you're dealing with an older character who's looking back at the violence of his past, I don't know if Arnold is quite up to Clint's chops for material like that, but I'm excited to see it.
It'd be interesting to see Conan just living in a hut with 2 kids, and all of a sudden someone comes to town, needs his help to go get some bandits.
Now, I don't know if this has ever happened before, where a role has been rebooted and the original actor came back to take its place. And that made me wonder, is there any other actor you would like to see return to a role, either that has been rebooted or just forgotten or never assumed would get reprised again?
Ooh, that's interesting. I haven't really figured this one out. I mean, I just watched Jean-Claude Van Damme or JCVD, and I was thinking, there were films obviously like Bloodsport that I really liked, but I don't really know if I care for him to go back and do the splits again, even though that someone's probably broached the topic with him several times. Do you have somebody in mind?
Well, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here because I mentioned this movie probably every episode, but I think it would be pretty awesome to see Peter Weller, post this reboot, return as RoboCop. But I like the idea of an older face of Peter Weller and this big, old, bulky robot in a world where maybe technology has advanced way past him. Maybe this reboot will be awesome, and I will totally never want to see Peter Weller in the role again. But just that idea of a big, bulky robot, and the rest of it, it could look like the new Total Recall. It could be super future, but you have this old school 80s style idea of what the future is. That's an awesome movie in my head.
Well, if we were to pick a character that I loved and probably most people loved, but was treated poorly in the sequels, similar to RoboCop with fighting robot ninjas, but I would definitely go with Neo from The Matrix. If they're going to pull a Conan the Legend and just completely disregard the sequel and the reboot, then why can't they just do that with The Matrix and just say, Reloaded and Retaliation? What's the third one called?
Well, what is it?
Revolutions? I think
Revolutions.
It's Revolutions.
Yeah.
But if they just said those didn't happen and they did it better. Because I think sometimes sequels tend to just, kind of put a little bad look at the original. I'd like to think that maybe they'd say, we'll give it another shot and redo that. But that's never going to happen.
That's not going to happen. And I know I've mentioned this on the show before, but I'd like to see J.K. Simmons return as J. Jonah Jameson in the rebooted Spider-Man. And while I'm on a kick with superheroes, I might just say it'd be cool to see Michael Keaton return as an older Batman. Perhaps if they ever do a Batman Beyond movie, I think that would be fun to see.
That would be awesome.
Now we've passed the Rubicon. We were talking about superhero movies again. Happens every episode. We can't help it just because that's the state of movies today.
Nice little bridge there with Batman, too. So kudos to you, Jacob.
Yes, exactly. Well, there's a bunch of movie news this week in the Xmen franchise. This is the continuing franchise owned by or operated by Fox and not Marvel and Disney. And they've had some struggles in the past, and it looks like they hit another roadblock this week with Matt Vaughn, the director of X-Men First Class, dropping out of the First Class sequel. And I think this is as good of time as any. I want to give Fox this suggestion before they move on, and they should just get Brett Ratner again.
What? Well, they're going with, it sounds like Bryan Singer, and I have... there's really never been a Bryan Singer film that I've been a fan of, including X-Men or X2.
What? Well, it sounds to me like... Well, why I made the joke about Brett Ratner is because I don't know if you remember that Vaughn was attached to direct X3 originally, and then backed out, and that's when they got Ratner. That wasn't a serious suggestion by any means.
Well, I was just saying that I think that they could have done both those films better, and obviously X3 could definitely have been done much better, but... I don't know. I think this is obviously raising a red flag. I was trying to think of any movie where a director backed out and they got somebody right at the end to fill his shoes and it turned out to be a success, which is, considering how good X-Men First Class was, it's just sad to think that the follow-up, especially something with X-Men and time travel involved, could be the worst of the whole bunch.
I originally feared the worst, and I think X3 also had the same problem where Vaughn dropped out right before it was starting to film. I mean, and that's why Ratner gets a lot of blame, and he didn't do a good job, but he also wasn't handed the best of circumstances either. And I think Singer, who was attached as a producer and as an established director, and probably has to earn some Hollywood cachet back after, his Jack the Giant Killer movie hasn't been released yet, but the fact that it keeps getting postponed is not a good sign for that. I'm remaining cautiously optimistic. I feared the worst originally because Fox has a reputation for boning this kind of stuff up, but since it seems like Vaughn still has a pretty good relationship with Fox, maybe it was just honestly a change of heart. I don't think there's been any reason given in any of the press releases I've read about why he left. But it looks like he's still attached to direct The Secret Service with Fox, which is an adaptation of a Mark Millar comic book. It's reminding me, and again, we haven't seen how this film turned out, but of The Hobbit, how the producer who had stepped back, Peter Jackson, ended up taking it over when Guillermo del Toro backed out. But
apparently that looks like it's much in vain with the original three. I don't know. It's not extremely similar because they did have time to prep and do it the Peter Jackson way. That's the nice thing about those films. And probably in this situation where Bryan Singer could turn it around is that they have a producer in place who is a director and knows the material.
Yeah, it's not good news anytime a director leaves, but I'll remain cautiously optimistic. Obviously, they haven't started shooting yet, so maybe they'll announce a delay pretty soon. But it's not the next X-Men film we're going to see anyway. Next year, we are seeing a new X-Men film in the form of the Wolverine, which we've talked about a little bit. I'm a big fan of Hugh Jackman and his portrayal of Wolverine, so I'm quite excited for this film, and I'm even more excited now that the news came out this week that this is not going to be another prequel like X-Men Origins Wolverine First Class or whatever it's called.
You are? See, because I'm not exactly sold on this not being a prequel. Like, if it's truly going to follow X3. Is that specifically what's happening?
Well, they're talking about how they don't want to be bound to, and this is the problem I find these prequels have. They keep contradicting the movies that come after it with each one you make, because it just keeps, they don't do it in major ways, but if you watch them all continuously, all these holes start to show up. That's the problem with any prequel, or when you go back. They just haven't gone forward since X3, so that's why I'm excited. I don't think they're going to incorporate any other X-Men, but then you don't have to worry about how this fits into leading into Bryan Singer's 2000s X-Men. Mm-hmm. It's about the character moving forward, and you can actually experience growth for the character instead of amnesia bullets or whatever they did.
Silver bullet, adamantium bullets right to the brain.
And Hugh Jackman's also not getting any younger. He's in great shape, but if you're going to play this immortal type character, I mean, I know now they can do all sorts of things in post where they remove the wrinkles, like they did in Benjamin
Like they
Button.
did in X3.
Yeah, exactly. That we see a younger Magneto and Professor X in that. But I don't know. I like the idea of it being a sequel and maybe even setting up the story going forward. It sounds like that this film is going to deal with Wolverine's immortality and, in a kind of a Highlander way, who wants to live forever. Those are themes that really interest me. So I'm glad it doesn't have to be filled into this weird X-Men donut that's been created between First Class and X3. It can pave some new ground, and I'm glad that you are on the opposite side so we can see who's right in 2013 when the film actually comes out.
I'm cautiously optimistic. That's the term.
Well, that about does it for movie news. Let's move on to our feature review for the week, which will be the Wachowskis and Tom Tickwer's Cloud Atlas.
Our lives and our choices, each encounter,
Louis Sarray, Spyglass Magazine.
right, suggests a new potential direction.
That's it. The music from my dream.
I call it the Cloud Atlas Sextet.
At home.
Movements I wrote imagining us meeting again and again in different lives.
The karmic saga Cloud Atlas tells 6 stories, including that of an 1800s notary befriending a slave on the high seas, a 1970s journalist uncovering a nuclear conspiracy, and a genetically engineered clone on the run from an oppressive government, and that's only the half.
Fear, belief, love, phenomena that determine the course of our lives. These forces begin long before we are born and continue after we perish.
Based on an award-winning novel by David Mitchell, Cloud Atlas is a nearly 3-hour epic that takes place over 6 centuries, is set in numerous countries, and features actors playing multiple roles. It was such an undertaking that it required 3 directors, Andy and Lana Wachowski, the directors who famously gave us the Matrix trilogy, and Tom Tickwer, who directed the 90s cult classic Run Lola Run. A couple of months ago, the directors released an extended 7-minute preview of the film, and it was at that moment, with its images of ships on the high seas, laser guns and Asian clones, and Tom Hanks with weird face makeup, that it instantly became my most anticipated film for the second half of 2012. We talked about it a bit on the show, and I predicted that it was either going to be a mind-blowing masterpiece or a disaster of legendary proportions. Now, I know I have a penchant for hyperbole sometimes, but I wanted to know on which end of that spectrum does Cloud Atlas fall. In your opinion, Pat, is it closer to being an instant classic or spectacular folly? Or are you going to completely blow my mind and liken it to just another day at the movies?
No, I don't think I'm going to be doing any more pushing when it comes to at least this question. But, classic is such a loaded word. I would say it's closer to classic, at least sci-fi classic. Maybe not Hollywood, golden, let's bronze it and put a statue on, what's it called? The Sunset Strip or anything. But it's without knowing the novel, or even if the structure of the story is exactly the same as it is in the film, it's a spectacle to say the least. There's 3 hours dancing back and forth through time, and the actors, they play multiple characters. I don't know if people heard that, but some of them, like Tom Hanks, plays 6. He might have even played 7 if you count the movie within the movie. But it was definitely quite a cinematic blow for an ambitious, just huge cinematic experience to be so ambitious science fiction film. Would you say that, that you're on the side that I'm on, or were you falling asleep halfway through?
I did ultimately end up on the side of this is really ambitious near masterpiece. I will say that there was a period early on while watching this where I downright hated the movie for a period.
Oh, interesting. Where'd that come from?
And I said that immediately after the film, and the film is so long, I couldn't track it. I do think it was at a period where Tom Hanks was in one of his more crazy facial costume, or I don't know what you would call it, makeup attachments, and it just felt so ridiculous to me.
Where he has the pencil beard?
Might have been the time where he plays an Irish writer. It took me a while to catch up to the film. I think this is a film that starts at a full sprint, and you need to immerse yourself into it, because once you do, the stories are straightforward, the themes are laid out right there for you. But there was a time I was not catching up, and maybe there are a lot of those factors were on my personal end, but I was getting frustrated by the camp level of seeing obviously recognizable actors under stupid rubber noses, and the fact that the tone was shifting so dramatically from sequence to sequence.
It was interesting. I didn't know which scenes were directed by, or which storylines were directed by which set of directors until the very end, when they tell you, the Wachowskis did, I think they did the Neo-Soul part and the post-apocalyptic part, and maybe the piano player. Is that the correct?
Oh
group?
Gosh, I know they did the 2. I think they did the 2 future ones and one of the. I'd have to look it up. Darn it, I don't have it in my notes.
Well, anyways, I was still pretty impressed with how well they looked together. I mean, there were definitely times where it seemed like they were filming in maybe different mediums, because the 1970s version set was not the Wachowski brothers, and it was definitely probably the grittiest or film looking one of the bunch. Not so much as the scientific future. It was obviously set in like a political system, almost like 3 Days of the Condor or something. Yeah. But I still felt like it all flowed pretty well. There were parts that there's definitely things I felt were wrong with it or could have been done better. But it didn't really feel like 6 different directors or 2 different directors throughout the entire film.
Oh, not at all. It's very, I wouldn't call it seamless, but that's part of the point. And what I was struggling with so early on in the movie, and I could tell the guy behind me was struggling with even more, but I tweeted about this. There were several loud, like exhaustive sighs going on throughout the course of the movie. And the fact that when it would go into the far future, they're speaking this sort of made up version of English. And it's so weird and so different. And usually I eat that stuff up, but I was just resisting it for a period, and then I just sort of came around on it, and then just started really appreciating how many chances and risks this film was taking with narrative and tone and genre. Like that 1970s sequence is just like a thriller out of the 70s, and one of the other segments is just this really ridiculous broad comedy. It's so interesting to see how drastically you can change tones from scene to scene. It's really an experiment. That said, there are certain parts of the experiment that don't work, but I really came to appreciate the parts that did.
The part you're talking about, I think, is with Jim Broadbent, where
Yeah.
he's an old man who's committed to well, not so much an old man, but he's committed to a nursing home. Mm-hmm. And that might have been the slapstick part. But the part that didn't really work for me very much is in the future sequence, especially in Neo Soul, where the combat just kind of seemed, the action sequences seem to come out of completely different part of from where the rest of the film is. There really isn't action scenes like there is in that set, and maybe towards the end in the true set in the future with Tom Hanks and the crazy almost Jar Jar Binks dialect. But it seemed like they were almost underwritten and tagged in, like they didn't know exactly how to get certain things to happen in the story. And I'm sure, knowing science fiction, that they are in the book, but they didn't translate as well, especially with the weaving of the other films. Were you on board with the action sequences?
That sequence in general, the Neo Soul sequence, was one of the ones that left me more cold out of the 6.
Agreed.
And I did think the spectacle in it was interesting. I did think the effects were good. Looking back at it, I really do want to revisit this film, knowing where it's going from the very beginning. I think that one is supposed to be like a sci-fi action film with the Wachowskis, who set a new bar for action with The Matrix, and with each film have done progressively more interesting things with action sequences. It was pretty straightforward, and they saved a lot of their visual spectacle scenes where you wouldn't really expect it. But I could see that on the action. It wasn't something that really bothered me. I was more bothered by, I'll just go out and say it, there was a lot of race and gender bending among the 6 roles. And when you're dealing with like an actor like Tom Hanks or Halle Berry, who you Jim Broadbent, who you can instantly recognize, and Hugo Weaving, the rubber noses and all the prosthetics, it just kind of devolves into camp, and it's more distracting than anything. I get where they're trying to say with it, but by trying to do it with so many actors so many different times, it's more distracting and took me out of the movie more than it sucked me in.
I kind of felt that way, at least at first, when he started to see Hugo Weaving as a nurse. And it was very obviously, a man dressed as a nurse. But I don't know if that really was as much a deal for me as it was the Neo Soul sequence. It almost felt like it was completely a different film, where just when they cut to it and the fast-paced techno action of it, it should have been almost dealt with like a Kill Bill Part 1, where there's the anime sequence. The whole story is set by itself. Almost if this film would have led up to Who Sum Ni, I think that was her name, who she was, and then suddenly they give almost her entire story in one sequence. Because breaking from that to people dealing with oil and nuclear energy in the 1970s, and then back to the 1800s of people on a boat, it just felt really oddly paced.
I think, though, if they were to dedicate just a chunk to just tell that story, would take away everything the film's trying to do with montage and with shifting tones and genres so dramatically from scene to scene. But that said, if one part of the montage doesn't work for you, it can really dislodge the film, and it sounds like that one kind of did for you on a certain level.
A certain level, but I still, by the end of the film, I was there. It just took a while for that one to get going for me personally. And there is a joke at one, and it also has a lot to do with almost a retread with Matrix-style themes, especially in that one. And I assume you saw what I'm talking about, but most people who see it are probably going to feel that one has said things that the Wachowskis have said before. Obviously, we mentioned it's ambitious and whatnot. Do you feel as a whole it's something new, something different?
People could just say, based on a book, how original can it be? But I think they're obviously bringing their own voice to this. Being more familiar with the Wachowskis than Tom Tykwer, it's much more clear to see that they are dealing, again, with the same things of individuality and human connections. I think this may not be the best film of the year or my most favorite or anything, but I think ultimately it might get looked back as one of the most important, just because it does so many different things, not just in the editing, but I think in the storytelling and with the acting and the casting. I do think it is original in that respect. You?
Oh, definitely. I felt like it felt fresh, like it's not borrowing from other works where you're coming out of it and immediately going, similar to coming out of Avatar and you say, oh, this is Fern Gully, but set in space or something like that. Outside of, obviously, my picadillos with the Matrix, there's a discussion here of, why people keep coming to to films like this, and they talk about that there's a lot to do with reincarnation and reborn lives and idolatry and things like that. That's very interesting and not exactly something where you can immediately point to what done this film before.
I think I joked after seeing it that there's probably at least a dozen themes in this film. You could write a college paper a dozen times over about the themes in this film, and they might not cover every theme correctly or most tactily. I think there's monologues for pretty much every of the 6 stories have a monologue that pretty much espouses a theme in the film, and it's a little heavy-handed. But if you didn't have those, there'd be even more people lost and not getting anything from your film. So I'm willing to forgive those.
One of the things about doing this after the movie's been released is that its box office is out, and it may be wading into John Carter territory.
Oh.
So you don't really know how many people are going to see it or if our recommendation will have any effect. But I would definitely say if you have 3 hours to spare, it's something to definitely see. I'd say seeing it on the big screen is the way to go.
Yeah, I think, and recommend is such a strong word with this, because I know certain people I would not recommend this film to. But I think if you value... Well, first off, it's a great value. It's nearly 3 hours, and you get 6 movies in one, pretty much. But if you value chances and audacity in storytelling, this is an experience of a film. Even if you hate it, it's still, you can't deny the fact that it's an experience, and I think you need to go to the theater. And especially if you're like me and you're challenged with it for the first half hour or whatever, you almost need to be absorbed by it and not given the choice to leave in order to be turned around on it. I recommend the theatrical experience for this one.
Well, there it is, folks. I guess that'll wrap up our discussion of Cloud Atlas. Jacob, give him the warning from the MPAA.
Cloud Atlas is rated R for violence, language, sexuality/nudity, and some drug use. When we get back, we'll talk about what's new on DVD and have a little conversation about the films that have spooked us to the very core. Stay tuned. New on DVD this week, that's the week of October 30th. Couple films I'm actually kind of excited for. The one that I'm less excited for would be The Campaign, the comedy that came out this summer with Zach Galifianakis and Will Ferrell. Pat, will you be checking that one out?
Maybe. Will Ferrell kind of brought me back into the fold with his his Mexican soap opera film, but I don't know. Zach Galifianakis, I'm hot and cold on him.
Okay, these two I'm actually quite curious about, though. Ruby Sparks and Safety Not Guaranteed. Ruby Sparks being about a writer who brings his creation to life, and it's romantic and fun, even if it has what's-his-face, who I don't really care for. What is his face?
Paul Dano.
Paul Dano. And Safety Not Guaranteed with Mark Duplass and Aubrey Plaza, the time travel comedy. I definitely want to check out both of those.
I thought I saw that Safety Not Guaranteed was on Amazon last week, so I was all excited to check it out, and lo and behold, I was wrong. But I definitely want to see that because of they found for those who don't know, is about a classified ad that was posted in a paper, and it says, traveling to the future, must bring your own weapons or whatever, looking for someone to come with me. And just the idea that they got the whole film based off of a classified ad, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think that film has been, and Ruby Sparks as well, have been available on certain on-demand. I think I saw it on iTunes earlier, but we talk about what's new on DVD, darn it. And speaking of new to DVD, direct-to-video, I don't know why I mentioned this. I don't even like the original. A Christmas Story 2 is coming out. Sure to, at least it'll give TBS some variety, maybe, for their Christmas Day screenings. Who knows? And I have a mea culpa to do. I should have mentioned it last week, but unfortunately, the source I go for my new on DVD list left it off. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter came out on DVD last week. Yes, I know. And that was the movie we reviewed on our very first pilot episode. So I just wanted to say, if you missed it in theaters, you can go. I actually don't listen to the pilot. I'm sure it was pretty bad, but the movie is it is what it is. It would be a fun Halloween rental.
It's definitely worth some time. Yeah, Halloween rental. Very, very nicely put.
Pat, did you see anything cool this week or weekend?
I watched Rocky Balboa for the first time, and it was
really?
just something about. I heard it on the radio about 3 or 4 times, maybe. I don't know exactly where it came from, but then all of a sudden I was like, I'm going to sit down and watch this thing, and it happened to be on the CW of all places, and totally restored my faith in Rocky, because I'm not a fan of Rocky 4 in any way. I know a lot of people think it's funny and ridiculous, or I will crush you, or whatever that line is from Ivan Drago, and Rocky 5 is obviously garbage. But I think it was maybe the best of the whole series, because I am not a huge Rocky fan, but it was something cool, especially when he starts tearing his kid apart. Also, I watched Get the Gringo, which might be a quasi-sequel to Payback, and for those who enjoy Mel Gibson doing his gritty voiceover talk. And I mentioned JCVD. Really, really interesting film there. Jacob, what did you see?
I haven't seen any of those 3 films you mentioned, and I just want to mention quick, and I'll throw it out there, get your feedback on it. Maybe our listeners will let us know. Sure. I do really want to do the Rocky series as our next franchise flashback, because the only one I've seen all the way through is Rocky 3.
Well, interesting. Maybe that would make me rethink my idea of Ivan Drago and what he did wrong.
I do think most of them are on Netflix, too, so that's a better entry point for our listeners as well. But this weekend, I was dog sitting at a place, and I was also house sitting, and they had Netflix Instant, and I was like, I need to find a movie that both myself and the dog can watch. So we watched The Grey, this film starring Liam Neeson. The dog liked it fine, if you're wondering first, but like many, I was expecting Taken with wolves. This film is not like that. It's much more grounded. It's a realistic thriller slash I guess I would almost call it a drama. But yeah, it's a pretty good movie. Did you see The Grey?
No, I haven't. But it's interesting you say that it's grounded, because every time someone brings it up, they talk about him fighting wolves, and how preposterous those sequences were. Do you think that was those were real, where he made these ridiculous gloves out of bottles and whatnot he found on his plane?
You know, to even address that scene would be a major spoiler.
Oh, so, well, it was in the trailer, so that's all I know.
I know.
That's the only thing I know is he fights wolves with bottles on his hands.
I will say this about the film, and I imagine people who say that about the bottle scene did not see the actual film. This is a film that was greatly done a disservice by its marketing and promotion. Oh. They sold a completely different film than what the film is. But it definitely was more haunting than the actual horror film I saw this week, which I went to the theater and saw Sinister, which is, I think, a pretty well-made horror film, but if nothing exceptional. I think standards of horror films are lower than other films somehow, but just because there are so many bad ones. So when there's one that is at least, average, it rises above the crop. And no, I think it's a decent creeper and has some good scenes. I like Ethan Hawke. I wouldn't say people need to go out to the theater to see it, but if it ever shows up on Netflix, much like the recent Insidious, I think that's the name of the movie, you could do worse than stream it for a couple of hours. But speaking of horror films, with this episode being released on Halloween, we thought it would be a good opportunity to talk, not about our favorite horror films necessarily, but the films that got the job done and actually spooked us. People change over time, as do the things that frighten us, so Pat and I are going to talk about the films that have scared us the most over different periods in our lives. Pat, this was your idea. I have to give you credit for it.
Thank you. I'm an original person. I'm sure no one's ever had this conversation ever.
So I'm going to ask you to go first.
Well, fantastic. I think what brought this up is Sinister, actually, because people were saying how good it was. And on top of that, I caught a little bit, I don't know how it was, but a clip of Michael Jackson's Thriller on YouTube.
Ooh.
And but long music video scared the complete crap out of me when I was like a 5-year-old kid. I remember my parents had it on at like a party when we lived we must have been 4 because we still lived in Illinois. But they had it on, and I could not get to sleep that night. And there was like a rule that you couldn't show Pat Michael Jackson's Thriller. So it just made me think, what's changed since then till now, and movies that just got the better of me as a kid. So first I wanted to start with The Gate. Have you seen The Gate, Jacob?
I have not seen The Gate.
Okay, well, The Gate is a film about this family in, I think it's California, that has a house, and in their backyard is this tree over a giant pit, and in this pit are these little creepy little monsters. And if the gate ever opens up and you of course read these Latin scriptures, you will bring this beast onto the world. And the whole thing is little kids battling these beasts that are in their backyard, and they have to stop this monster from coming up and destroying humanity. And of course it's ridiculous, and they use a lot of forced perspective and people in monster suits to make up for 6-inch tall creepy little freaks. But man, when I was a kid, my brother and his best friend, Andy Bushnell, showed it to me. Well, I was over at Andy's house and they said, "Oh, let's watch The Gate." And I was like, okay, I've never heard of that. And, oh my gosh, I used to have these things where I'd wake up in the middle of the night and my heart would be pounding, like someone would be punching me in the chest. And I just remember screaming about that. And my mom getting so upset that they showed me The Gate. this 1987 horror film. That and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 1978 version. Two movies that freaked me out. And I just rewatched The Gate. It's not nearly as scary, but Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I've seen that recently, and it's still a quality film, especially Leonard Nimoy's little toss in there.
Is The Gate on Netflix Instant?
It is on Netflix Instant, so you can check it out for free. It's short. It's like 85 minutes long. Nothing spectacular. I'm not necessarily recommending it, but if you want to know me as a 6-year-old, 5-year-old kid, there you go.
I thought I saw it on there, so I'm glad to hear that. I'm going to go way back and way obscure to a film that isn't available on Netflix Instant or let alone on DVD. It's an episode of The Wonderful World of Disney. It's a TV movie called Mr. Boogedy that aired in 1986, and I would have been around 3. We had it taped on VHS and watched it several years into my youth. And this is a film that I was able to rewatch thanks to the wonders of the internet and YouTube, where someone uploaded a very crappy taped off VHS version of it. And it's a very family-friendly haunted house film where the Boogedy Man is an evil pilgrim with a magic cloak. And I remembered him being a scary-looking dude, and he still is a scary-looking dude. But the film is, I can forgive my mother for showing me this because it's so innocent and soft. But rewatching it was a trip because if there's something that you haven't watched in 20+ years but watched repeatedly, you know every line of dialogue even though you can't quote it, but when it's said it's like, whoa, I totally remember this. It's had some funny people in it. John Astin from the Addams Family was in it, Christy Swanson and David Faustino as young kid actors. Yeah, it's just a goofy movie. I can't recommend it, but it's the kind of film that gets its scares out of disappearing teddy bears and slimy footprints on the wall. But It's not horrible. Like I said, it's kid friendly, but I wouldn't recommend you showing it to your kids on this crummy YouTube video. But we will post the link if you're very curious. How about the next phase in your life, your teen years, 11 through 18?
Well, true horror films, I'd probably have to go with Hellraiser. Just, I don't know, maybe it's the Catholic in me. I was raised Catholic, but something about hell. Actually, I think the characters like Pinhead and his friends are not from hell. They're from someplace in between hell. I think they come up with a sensation that's a mix of pain and pleasure, but it just looks like pain and horrible pain from what I remember.
It doesn't look too pleasurable.
That movie, there's the only true horror film I remember. Outside of that, I had some really bad experiences watching Event Horizon by myself in a basement with the lights out, and Very Bad Things with a group of friends, and just thinking realistically how terrible that would be to be one of the characters in Very Bad Things. Jacob, have you seen any of those?
I've seen Hellraiser a few times, but I have not seen Event Horizon or Very Bad Things.
Are you serious? You haven't seen either of those films?
I have not. Event Horizon has been on my list, even though I've heard very mixed things about it. The fact that there's a spaceship and Sam Neill in it make me want to see it, but the other Paul Anderson-ness of it has kept me away. Paul W.S. Anderson.
Well, I haven't seen it obviously since college, but it was definitely a key movie in my teens that freaked the hell out of me.
Add it to my movie blind spots list, and we'll get to it at some point. Well, in my teen years, those were the years I became a huge horror freak. Before I was even into movies, I was into horror films. And I watched so many slasher films and zombie films and other horror classics. I kind of became desensitized a little bit to jump scares and most horror conventions. That said, one film, The Omen, really did manage to freak me out pretty good.
Well, that's a blind spot for me. I have not seen it.
Okay, well, then I won't get into spoilers. Most of it is pretty standard stuff, really elaborate kills like you would see in the Final Destination series. But the very end of this movie, there's a really scary last shot, and I'm not going to spoil what it was, but it's mainly the music that got to me. The Jerry Goldsmith score consists of Latin chants, and I just remember being really creeped out watching The Omen for the first time, and that music coming out. I rewatched it a few years ago, and it didn't quite give me the exact same chills, but that music is still the best thing about that movie, and that's creepy stuff.
So obviously those are the films of your teen years. Yeah. What about college? What hit you there?
Well, I mentioned my desensitization, if that's a word, of most horror things. So the things that freaked me out in my college and adult years were slightly different than horror films. But I will say 2000's Requiem for a Dream is a very intense film. And I can think of few films that gave me the actual physical reaction I got after watching that, being all shooken up. But I actually remember jumping out from my seat. And there's a scene in that film where a refrigerator kind of comes to life and shakes up the screen. And I just remember having stereo surround sound for the first time. And it was one of the first movies I watched with it. And it just came out of the right speaker. I jumped out of my seat and I could not watch the rest of the movie for like a good minute. So it's not a horror film, but it's the first film to actually get me out of my seat and be like, holy moly. I get a soda and then come back. I don't know, man. How about you? College?
That would definitely be Rosemary's Baby. I didn't see till college, and that freaked me out. And The Exorcist I technically saw in high school since I wasn't at college yet, but I saw it when I was 18 in the summer after high school. And those films, both of them, were movies where I had to have I had the lights on in my car when I was driving home and music blaring that was like, happy ska music, not anything like even remotely dark. And, I had to sleep with all the lights on in my room and, stayed up really late so that I wouldn't, possibly be, like consumed by the devil or something. Who knows? Just those, obviously those are two films that some people consider two of the scariest movies ever made. But even The Omen is considered one of the scariest movies ever made, but they still stick with me. I can't watch them, and I've shown them to like my wife and girlfriends before her, and it's everyone I know cannot watch The Exorcist. So there's at least some universality to that film being freaky.
I do like The Exorcist quite a bit as a film. It never really scared me, particularly. Maybe it's because I'm not. You're a Catholic, correct? How much of that do you think plays into The Exorcist?
I watched it with an atheist girlfriend at one point, and she did not care at all. But I was like, I'm Catholic. I was raised Catholic at least, and that probably plays a huge role in it. A whole great big fear of God and the devil when you're a kid, and then to have the human manifestation of the devil in what appears to be a real world, not kids going out to the woods and getting hacked up by somebody with a machete. It's just a little girl in Washington D.C. who's overcome with some possessed spirit.
Well, that brings us to today, 25 to now, what we would call quote unquote adulthood. I don't feel like an adult. But I'll go first. This is a movie I just saw a month or so ago. Again, it's not a horror film, but it's 2000 Stranger with a Camera, which is a documentary. And this only scares me because I am a documentary filmmaker or an aspiring documentary filmmaker. For those who are not familiar with Stranger with a Camera, it's about a documentarian who's shooting a poor neighborhood in Kentucky for this film that's going to be this big art film. He's going to have 5 screens projected at once or something like that. And he is shot and killed by the person who owns the land with a very limited warning. He's warned, and the guy starts to get his camera, and then he's shot and killed. And it just... maybe it's unfair of me to go with a real life story and something that's so specific to being a documentary filmmaker, but I could so see this happening, and now I'm scared to death a little bit. It's got this Deliverance type feel to it, and I'm never going to forget that film for every shoot I go on. Just know that there are crazy people out there. Now bring us back. I didn't mean to go so dark, Pat. What scares you nowadays?
It's interesting because you were talking about being desensitized, but I think I have reached that point as well, because there really hasn't been anything that's been a horror film and disturbed me. Maybe that's a good thing. These completely, ridiculous horror films that don't happen. You don't have people with hooks coming, inside your house and calling your face apart. But interesting thing is, like, one of my best friends has a son, and he says he can't watch any movie where things happen to children. And I was thinking, that's an interesting way to look at it. I don't have a kid, so I don't have the exact same worldview, but a couple of years ago, I think we saw this together, but Company Men came out, and I remember after I saw that movie, I was like, oh man, the family loses everything because of the stock market crash, and this guy gets laid off and whatnot. But 2008, and it's set in the real world, so it's a real thing that people can go through, and it kind of makes you think about being a little more fiscally responsible and just making better choices with what's important to you. And it's not a horror film, but it's definitely something that grabs a part of you if you're invested in that serious part of life. And if I have to go horror film, maybe the original Saw. Okay,
we both end on kind of real world downers in a way. But
we're wise with age now.
We reached out to the Facebook and Twitter communities, and we got a great response. We will get to those after the break. Stay tuned. What's coming up in theaters this coming Friday, November 2nd? Few major releases. It's going to be tough for us to choose what to review, I think. Flight, the newest film by Robert Zemeckis. The Man with the Iron Fists, the directorial debut of the RZA, looks pretty ridiculous. And the Disney animated film Wreck-It Ralph. Also in limited release is The Bay, which is a Barry Levinson found footage horror film. This Might Be the Place, which is a Sean Penn as Robert Smith / Nazi hunter, I think. I don't know much about that film.
It's been on the shelf for a couple years, I think, because I remember seeing he's got this big crazy hair in it. It almost came out last summer. I'm interested to see why it took so long.
Yeah, it's finally out next week on demand and in theaters. And Vamps, the another film that's been on the shelf actually for a long time, I know. The reunion of director Amy Heckerling and Clueless star Alicia Silverstone. Also in that film, Kristen Ritter of Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, a show my wife and I watch, but I don't think we'll be checking out Vamps, that to say. But we will probably, we are 99% sure we are going to review Wreck-It Ralph next week. I'll just say 100% sure it's going to be Wreck-It Ralph.
Hey, if something happens and all the Wreck-It Ralphs get burned, I would love to see Man with an Iron Fist. Why is Russell Crowe in this movie? That's my one question.
I am so curious about the Man with the Iron Fists, too. I might have to check out both of them this weekend. I probably won't have the time this weekend, but at some point, I want to see Flight and Man with the Iron Fists and Wreck-It Ralph. We promised it. Now we're going to deliver it. We reached out to Twitter and we reached out to Facebook, and we asked what film scared you as a little kid, teenager / adult. And my Facebook just exploded. A lot of people saying The Birds. A lot of people saying Gremlins as a kid. Gremlins did scare me as a little kid, now that I remember that.
I think I might have seen that too late, because I don't remember being scared at all. Maybe it's because it's also pretty funny and you actually like the bad gremlin. He's kind of cool.
As an adult, I definitely love Gremlins and I'm not scared of it at all. But as a kid, I do remember they are scary looking things for a PG film. I did want to read a couple responses we got. A lot other people also say E.T. I guess E.T. himself is kind of creepy.
The landing sequence in the beginning was definitely unsettling to me when I was a kid.
Different people said Fire in the Sky.
Yeah, I saw that as well. I have never seen it. Is it really scary? Does it have to do with just the fear of probing or what?
Yeah, I guess people just don't like getting alien probed. I've never saw it either. It was on Netflix Instant for a while, but I missed that boat. I'll just read. Kirsten M. said, as a kid, one of her earliest memories was walking in on her mom watching The Birds and freaked out. Another person freaked out by Hitchcock. As a teenager, Halloween. She watched it at a party and it scared her. And adult, she says she loves scary movies, but exorcism movies are too much for her. And she also wishes us a happy Halloween and says she really likes the podcast and is a little behind, but enjoys listening to it.
Well, fantastic. That's a really nice comment there. Well, okay. On my list, I didn't get as much response from Facebook. I think I might have hit it late and stifled the responses with commenting back to them. Anyways, my good friend Andrew, he's mentioned Silver Bullet, which scared the bejesus out of him as an 8-year-old. Have you ever heard of Silver Bullet?
I want to say it's a Stephen King movie, but I've never actually seen it.
Well, there you go. I'm not too well versed in Stephen King. My good buddy Jordan, who I lived with, we actually both have a fear of Hellraiser. I remember showing it to him when we lived together, and he had obviously seen it, but he was so upset with me because it freaked him out. And he says it still freaks him out because nothing's changed. But as a kid, Crazy Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Tell me you've seen this film.
I've not seen Crazy Clowns from Outer Space.
Oh, man. So a town with a circus comes to town. Everyone thinks it's a normal circus, but they're aliens. They start abducting people and putting them in cotton candy, cocoons, and like sucking the life out of them. Oh, as a kid, it was kind of scary, but by the end of the film, you were more laughing than freaking out. See a little Candyman response in there. My buddy Brian said Predator as a kid, Fire in the Sky. And my buddy Jess, who I was in a band with long ago, said It. And I was never scared of It because it was just too long.
It is really long, and it was made for television. So my friend Doug said, as a kid, The Legend of Boggy Creek, which he showed me, we go way back. He showed that to me in elementary school. It's a scary Bigfoot film, and that is a scary film. The Return to Boggy Creek is less scary. It is much more of a family horror film. As a teen, he was scared of Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, which is the best one of the Friday the 13th films, I will add. And as an adult, he said the documentary Jesus Camp, and then that sentiment was echoed a few times in my Facebook feed. People scared of the fundamentalists of Jesus Camp. My feed got suddenly political, actually, and that's a good segue to say next week, with the election being past us, we are going to talk about our favorite political movies and our favorite movie politicians, but we want to get your feedback. So Pat, let the people know how they can get in touch with us.
Yeah, if you're not direct friends with Jacob or I and don't want to bombard our own Facebook walls, you can definitely hit us in 3 distinct and very popular ways, may I add. There's Twitter. You can hit us at Filmcast WOAC. That's our Twitter handle, Filmcast WOAC. It's also our Gmail. It's filmcastwoac@gmail.com. Send us an email. You can go into great detail there about whatever you want. And of course, on the website, filmcastwithoutacause.com. That's all one word, filmcastwithoutacause.com. Leave a note anywhere, and we will bring it up in the show, guaranteed. Those are the best ways to hit us.
I do want to thank everyone who wrote on my Facebook feed. There were so many great comments. I almost want to dedicate a whole podcast to them, but we will not.
Well, I guess until next week when we talk about the Phantom Menace and the International Senate, I guess
You're stealing my picks, man. See you guys later.
That's a wrap.
I'm finished.